Hey folks, it's Brian here at West Davidson Public Library, and I'm back for another edition of Geek Talk. Today I'll be talking about Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, Treaties, Trenches, Mud, and Blood. This is the fourth in the series of excellent historical graphic novels from the author and cartoonist Nathan Hale, who is also the writer and artist of the series. Just like the other entries so far, it starts with the original Nathan Hale, his namesake, forestalling his execution by telling the hangman and the British provost in charge of his execution another story to hold off that event. This one is the first story set in the 20th century, and this is about World War I, the supposed war to end all wars. And if you're not familiar or haven't read a lot about it, it was a pretty terrible thing, and Hale does his best to tell as complete a story of the First World War in one book in the series as he can. Even though it was a really terrible subject matter, just like the previous entries, he once again treats it with his usual wit and humor. The book opens with a dedication to his First World War I teacher, Snoopy. And for people my age, that was probably your first reference to World War I you ever saw too, with Snoopy battling the Red Baron. And in addition to that, he says, and I'm going to quote here, quote, he also explains World War I, one of the world's most deadly, horrific conflicts, using cute little animals. To do that, he represents Europe by having each country be represented by a different animal. And there's some ones you would expect, like a Russian bear and a British bulldog. And he does that to illustrate the big picture of World War I. And in spite of that tone, he describes the factors that made the war so terrible really well. He talks about, namely, the technological advances that led to death and destruction on a scale they had never had before. Namely, the advances in artillery and new weapons like the machine gun and poison gas were what made the war's battles so terrible. And they talk about that a lot. It also makes it clear that this is a true story and not just an animal fairy tale. One of the consistent images in the book is every so often one of the animal figures, who is based off of a real person, will turn into the actual person. It happens early on in the book and continues throughout. And it's really effective. It's a great way to cement that these were real people who were caught up in and caused some of the terrible events that happened in this war. And it punctuates those scenes repeatedly. And like I said, it's very effective. Equally effective is a different image they have repeating throughout it. Throughout the series, every year it shows a metaphorical representation of the war as the Greek god of war, Ares. And each year he gets more monstrous and more inhuman as he consumes more lives and causes more destruction. And it's a pretty heavy image, metaphorical image for a kid's book, but it is really effective. Again, I will say this series never fails to communicate how serious and terrible the events that they were talking about in these books were. I'll say that while it is talking about some pretty heavy subject matter, this series is aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds. It never gets overly graphic in its depiction of anything. They tell you about it, but they don't show anything terrible or awful. I'll also say, unlike previous entries in the series, this is mostly a big picture story. Unlike, say, the one-on-one naval battles from Big Bad Ironclad or the fairly horrific subject matter of the Donner Dinner Party, this is big picture. This is about all the unprecedented casualties and numbers and how of destruction that were occurring in this war. It's about that sort of thing. So as opposed to, while it occasionally has side scenes where it concentrates on smaller events, it's mainly the big picture. And they talk about how they're not able to talk about all of it just because of the length of the book. I will say the numbers of countries and men involved, the outdated tactics, and the horrible new weapons all contributed to those staggering numbers of casualties and widespread destruction. For those of you following the series, as in the books, and my series of reviews may be wondering, I will say this is nowhere near as disturbing a read as the last entry, Donner Dinner Party, was. But it's still a story about war, the supposed war to end all war, so it's not particularly happy reading either. Having said that, I highly recommend it. It's a fine addition to this series. I'm a military history guy, and it's mainly World War II, but I like a lot of stuff about World War I, and this was a really cool book that broke down the big picture causes of the war really well. It made it easier to understand for younger readers and even older readers like me. So I definitely highly recommend it once again. You can find this either on the Libby app, which is where I read it, or you can find it on ncdigital.overdrive.com. and I highly, highly recommend it as yet another great book in this series. By the way, I also wanted to let you know that here at West Davidson Public Library, we now have physical copies of some of the titles. We have Big Bad Ironclad. We have the aforementioned Donner Dinner Party. And we also have Alamo All Stars, which I will be reviewing in a future episode of Geek Talk. If you're interested in checking any of those out, just give us a call here at West Davidson Public Library, and we'll be happy to do that. And once again, thank you for listening to my Geek Talk.
Let's step away from graphic novels and manga and review a juvenile book. Hello, this is Wendy from West Davidson Public Library, welcoming you once again to my Geek Talk. As I stated before, on this Geek Talk, I will be reviewing a juvenile book. If you're ready to join me on this review, let's begin. Trailblazers by Sandra A. Agard. This book was published in 2019, and it is part of a biography series that celebrates the lives of amazing pioneers, past and present, from all over the world. This particular biography focuses on Harriet Tubman and her journey to freedom. In this book, we learn about Harriet's early years as a slave in Maryland. It also explains the events that led her to join the Underground Railroad, and it later on details her life in her later years. The book also gives a brief history of slavery, along with providing insight into the laws, the economic, political environment, and beliefs revolving slavery at the time. I found that the book provides all the important facts while keeping the data interesting. I did not find the book was too long or dull. I also liked how the book provided a timeline summary of events at the end, and it also provides a glossary so that the reader can familiarize themselves with the terms used throughout the book. If the reader wants to conduct further research on the subject of the biography, the book also provides a page or pages of references for further information. If you enjoyed the series Who Was and are looking for a step up, this is the series for you. I would recommend this for ages 8 and above. As I mentioned previously, this is part of a biography series from Trailblazers. We also have available other biographies if you're interested in reading these as well. If you're interested in the Harriet Tubman Trailblazer biography or any of the other ones shown before, you can give us a call at 336-853-4800. We are currently providing curbside service, so if you're interested in any of these books, please give us a call and we can check out or put the book on hold for you. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to join me next time on my Geek Talk. Have a nice day.